And then we'll move on to Everton. I think it was 2003 you signed by David Moyes. I think that was around about £1 million again. And you went in 2003. You must have been, when you played very well for Sunderland in that last season, even though they got relegated, moving to Everton, you must have felt, keep my form, get into a big club like Everton and hit the ground running. What was Everton like for you?
Yeah, there was still a lot of uncertainty that summer. I was out of contract or coming to the end of my contract, so the fee was a lot more easy to negotiate from the club that I was going to. So I was in the last year of my contract. There was quite a lot of interest. Actually, we were away pre-season that summer. We were up in Scotland on a pre-season friendly, and Mick McCarthy, who then just taken over at Sunderland, called me into his room up in the hotel there and said, "Look, we've agreed a fee with Southampton. Gordon Strachan's gone in there at Southampton, and the fee's been agreed. What do you think?" I just said, "Yeah." It didn't matter to me. It was back playing for a Premier League club. I wanted to stay in the Premier League. That was all that mattered to me. So there was a little bit of interest from Charlton. There was a lot of interest around that Southampton one. And all of a sudden, then I got back in on the Monday morning after the Southampton had agreed a fee. I said we were up in Scotland playing pre-season. When we went back down to the club, all of a sudden it seemed to die. I think they ended up signing Neil McCann during that spell. I think he must have been at Rangers, mustn't he? So they ended up signing Neil McCann. So Neil McCann then, obviously we were in the same position. The deal never happened. So I was in limbo across that summer, really. Obviously, the transfer window, that was the first ever transfer window. So if the transfer needed to be done, it had to be done by August. So I was then looking to push things, looking to move things on. There was, as I said before, there was interest. Charlton, a couple of other clubs were interested, but no deal could have been done. Then it was going to be a loan move. And as I said, I was in the last year of my contract, and it was hard. I thought it'd be easy. It was obviously a knockdown fee, but there was a lot of, I don't know, to and fro with a lot of clubs. David Moyes then, who'd been interested across the course of that summer, was constantly saying, "Yeah, we want to sign you, but trying to get the fees down." Everton weren't as rich as they are now. The fee was maybe half of it. I think Everton were trying to put 250 grand up front, and the rest with add-ons. It just wasn't working for Sunderland. It wasn't working for McCarthy. It was messy. So then, luckily enough, right at the last minute of that transfer window, luckily enough, it was actually a bank holiday weekend. So the transfer window closed a couple of days after August had finished. I think we were into September. And Everton had just been beaten in the Merseyside derby by Liverpool. Liverpool smashed them at Goodison. And David Moyes needed to do deals quickly. He had to get some transfers over the line. So I went in the same transfer as Nigel Martin, as James McFadden, and Franny Jeffers that signed back on loan from Arsenal. So Moyes signed the four of us then around that transfer window, and I was done. I was an Everton player. So I was absolutely delighted to go to such a big club. And I think, I think the best spell, certainly for the first 18 months there at that club. My best club football that I'd shown through my career was at Everton. Absolutely, yeah.
I was going to say that to you. It looked, from a fellow who watches football a lot, you were enjoying it. You could see it on your face. You could see the football the team was playing for probably the first 18 months. There was a buzz about Everton.
Yeah. First season was a struggle, Leon. We finished 17th. We just about stayed up. We say that we just about stayed up. We were guaranteed safety. Was about three or four games to go, and then we ended up losing the last few games of the season, and we then ended up finishing 17th. And it was a bit of a bad end. It was a terrible end to the season. David Moyes was under pressure. There was a lot of pressure, I think, around the team going into the next season. So it was just a crappy end to the season. That's maybe the only way you can describe it at times.
A bad end to it, but then you went on and finished fourth in the next season.
Yeah.
It was an amazing season.
Yeah, and that was after the Euros in 2004. Rooney left, went to Man United. So obviously we'd sold our prized possession, and we had characters, we had leadership on the pitch and off the pitch. We had so much within that dressing room. The people that were playing, if you look back who was in that dressing room, Kevin Campbell, Duncan Ferguson, David Weir, Alan Stubbs, Lee Carsley, Steve Watson, myself, there was so many different personalities. But honestly, I've never been in the dressing room where you had so many leaders, real leaders, who probably could have been captain at any other club. but we just had a dressing room that was solid, and we had quality as well. We signed Tim Cahill. We had Tommy Gravison in there as well. You know, quality whilst having that real steel about us. We had a good side, and that, looking back, you think, how on earth we finished 17th? And I'm not surprised that we finished 4th with that squad of players that we had.
And Kev, just to go back a little bit, I just want to ask you, we just touched on it, to finish just above the relegation zone, which shouldn't have happened because you were playing quite well, and then the end of the season just kind of was a disaster really for you. How did it go then when you get back into pre-season with them characters, with them leaders? Do you all need to kick up the arse and say, right, boys, let's get this right. This is not where Everton Football Club needs to be. Let's get our act together.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment how it was, but it wasn't necessarily even from David Moyes. Yeah, David Moyes was so intense every single day on the training ground. As I said before, attitude from everyone within that dressing room was actually top class. But it was more a bit of a coming together, you know, recognising the quality that was there at the club. And as I was saying before, Wayne was sold that summer. There was a muted takeover at Everton. Bill Kenwright was under a little bit of pressure because there was a lot of buyers that were looking to take over the club, take the club in a different direction. David Moyes was under severe pressure. There was a lot calling for David Moyes to be sacked at that time. And we had a small squad of players. We ended up finishing 4th with a core of probably 15, 16 players that were maybe used predominantly across the course of that season. There wasn't a lot of players used, I don't think. Maybe I'd be corrected, but I remember we had a 1 to 11 that was more or less set, and the next 3 or 4 subs, you could almost name them every single week who was going to come on in different positions. So I think we had that coming together during the pre-season. After Wayne was sold, the pressure that was on David Moyes, he went away to America and Austria during that summer, and there was a real coming together. And the following season, we lost the first game of the season. We got absolutely battered against Arsenal. I think it was 4-1 or something. Cesc Fabregas' debut at Goodison. So obviously then that heaped more pressure on us. But after that, we just went on and went from strength to strength across the course of that season. And it was a brilliant season and a real coming together for us all, yeah.
And then a pity, obviously, finishing 4th. That was in 2005, correct?
You tell me. I think it was 2004 or 5, yeah.
Yeah, because then obviously Liverpool won the Champions League, which unfortunately meant
good old Liverpool,
listen.
Good old Liverpool, yeah. Yeah.
No,
there was no way they were just going to allow us into the Champions League without them, were they?
No.
And then we got the draw against Villarreal just to kill us off even more.
I know. Well, look, I mean, but that's a pity because, in fairness, it would have been nice for you as a player. I mean, to have a real, even a crack at the group stages of the Champions League.
Yeah.
For those players who done well together as such a close-knit group and not the biggest squad, to be denied that chance to play in the Champions League group stages, I feel is quite harsh.
Yeah, absolutely. It was. It's different now, obviously. I think the qualification during those times when it was introduced as the fourth club, it hadn't been long introduced that there was actually 4 Premier League teams that was to qualify for the Champions League. So to get the draw we did, we knew we had a tough draw.